All right, so we're going to look at number 14 from the practice test. And this is comparing two histograms. So I'm going to come up here and just again review histograms. We're looking at numerical data. We use them for numerical data. And we look at the shape, the center, and the spread. For shape, we want to look at the symmetry, if it's skewed left or right, or if it's symmetric. We want to look at modality. So does it have one peak, unimodal, two peaks, bimodal, or more than that would be multimodal. We want to look for outliers, and those all help us define the shape. The second thing we look at is the center. So we're looking for the typical value, and like the highest peak, we'll relate those to get a sense of the center. And the next thing would be the spread, which indicates the variation in our data. So we have two histograms. So the histograms below show the monthly cost for operating two makes of cars, Ford and BMW. Which make typically has higher monthly costs? Which make has more variation in cost? So we want to look at higher. So the typical higher monthly cost, again, typical is going back to that center. So let's look at this. So the center, let's look at maybe thinking about what's about halfway less than these. And so we're looking at frequencies. So looking at frequencies, just again, eyeball of it, because I mean, they don't look that different, but I will say this tends to look like it has more higher values, right? So let's just maybe play around with it a little. This is, I don't know, let's say it's about 2, 1. We get up here, you've got almost 30% and 25%. So I think it's fair to say that about half the data is less than this value. So I would say, and this is in your book a lot, they have these bars to kind of show you where the center would be, or about halfway. So I would say that would be about the center of my data, right? And then for the Ford, by a similar idea, there's a lot of little values here. So you've got like 1, I don't know, what is that? 3, and so that'd be like 7. It's about 10, 15, I don't know, 25. So there's about 25% of the data, less than that, right? We got another small one. We start getting big here. We got like 40%. I'd say the halfway point here is about here. And I mean, these don't have to be perfect, but it just gives you a sense of where these things might be. And again, it's not perfect. And if you were with me in class earlier and you're rewatching this, I think this might not even be the exact same, but you get the idea. Because then this one is, and I might have done too much here because this is about 30. Yeah, that might be too much. Let me go back over one more. Yeah, because that's a little much. And for this one, because you have so much over here, this one I would say is skewed right a little bit. What I'm going to look at is I've got about 5, 7. So 7, 37. Yeah, so let's put it here. That's probably a little better. Because then that one's about 15, 37 and 15 gives me a bit. So that's probably a little more accurate. So the center for my BMW, I would say, is about 210. Whereas the center for Ford is going to be about 220. And the other thing with this I'm going to look at is the peak, right? So the peak for Ford is over here at what? So the most of it happens at 300. And this one has a peak at 300. Whereas the peak of this one is going to be at, what is that, 190? Yeah. So then this one has a peak at 190. So those things just help us kind of look at it because that's the one that happens the most often. Okay. And so that's going to be probably for part A, so higher monthly cost typically, and then more variation. So variation, let's talk about that. So for variation, let's maybe use yellow. Variation, we're looking for the spread, right? So for the spread, I mean, obviously this has a larger variation because it has a much larger spread than what we see above, right? Because this one varies, I would say, what is that? I mean, it's less than 200, where this one's clearly over 300. So clearly this has a larger spread, larger variation. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's come and let's go up here. Which one has higher monthly cost? So because let's see the answers down here. So we're looking at the manufacturer. So this is BMW Ford, right? W or Ford. Typically because the blank, yeah, we're looking at center and spread. Center spread of the data is, so if it's higher, then you want it to be higher than for the other one. Okay, well, so looking at what we had, who had it? The center. So center was higher for Ford, right? So we would say Ford here. Ford typically has higher monthly costs because the center, because center is what drives the typicality of it. The center is higher than for, not BMW is what it should have been. I'm not sure where it is there. Than it is for BMW. Okay. So Ford, oh, not sure what I just did there. So Ford, use red maybe. So Ford typically has, because the center of the data is higher than for BMW. Okay, now let's come here, number 5. Now, which one has more variation? So we said Ford, right? Ford had more variation. Ford has more variation because the spread, so the spread's what drives that, of the data is greater, I'm assuming, or wider, I'll have to look at a second, than for BMW. So let's see what they said. Is higher. Okay, so they used higher on that one too. So greater, higher. And they use spread. That's interesting. So the spread is higher, I would say, that's okay, than BMW. Okay, so did I put BMW? I meant Ford down. Oh, that was the last one. See, these things in order are confusing. So this, we start at 5 for the next one. So Ford has a greater variation or higher because the spread is higher than BMW. Okay, we filled it in. I think it's easier. I was just also circling it. So Ford had a center that was higher, and that indicated typical higher monthly cost. All right, because BMW's center was lower. Ford also has more variation because, you know, it can be less, it can be more. Ford has more variation because the spread of the data is higher than BMW. Okay, so that's number 13 from our practice test, and it is 2.1-2.19 if you're trying to match it up with something in the homework.